So first order of business is the acceptance of minutes from January 24th. Anybody have any comments or corrections about those?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to wait for the motion, but I've got a number of corrections.
Lay 'em
The
out.
attendance missed a lot of the people who were here. Like Emma, Evie,
It
Chris-
does list
and-
Portsmouth High School School Eco Club members, so I don't know if it needs. to
yeah,
go
I think we
specific.
really should have your names. And Gabe, Max Schrader, Brian Getz, Jay Barnard, I'm not sure, Jillian Richmond. So there were a lot of names, and then Kate Cook is drafting rules for the committee. I thought that was important to have in the notes. And then the last thing, the cap possibly being brought to city council. I thought it was March. That's what I had in my notes, and the notes for the meeting, the minutes say April, May, which sounds a long way off.
I think I might have said March, April, May.
All three, and I was optimistic writing
Yeah,
March.
It's up in the air.
So between March and May, maybe is a good way to put it. I don't know.
Okay.
So with those three changes, I move acceptance of the minutes.
Second.
Anybody else have any changes or anything they want to know? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. The next order of business is the facilitator and reporter schedule. Kate, do you want to
Well,
speak to that?
sounds like I gotta change it again, so please ignore the Google link that I sent. You're good on your placement. Well, so Tori was absent, so we gotta switch it around a little bit. And I know we like to have minute taker, then go into the facilitator role. So bottom line, it's gonna change again, so sorry about that. You'll get it next week, and hopefully it'll be perfect.
I'm wondering if we really need to change it,
Yeah.
or keep it this way. And I think, the general responsibility of somebody, if they can't be here, they get somebody to substitute. The schedule stays the same, and that's just like between the people who do the shift. So it's not extra burden on changing.
Yeah, that's a good
I
idea.
think,
I agree.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
So when Jess is supposed to facilitate, we'll just have Tori.
That's what I would say. That's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, a responsible thing to do. So if each of us is taking our role seriously when our time comes up.
Yeah, so just pull on that thread, Bert, if I heard you correctly, if I am not going to be here and I'm signed up to be a facilitator or a note taker, it is my responsibility to find another member to step in and take my role or swap with them. Because I don't think, Kate, that you should be responsible for trying to herd cats. I think the committee members should be responsible.
I wouldn't object.
Yeah.
I think that's a good norm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's.
can I suggest that we put in the minutes the Google Docs link? I think it'd be great, because I don't know if you all got that.
Kathy, do you know how much I like your ability to look at stuff and see that what's not there? Thank you.
So is there any further discussion? Do we need to do anything further? Should we vote on that, or we're just all in favor of sticking with the schedule and letting people be responsible? Does that work for you?
Good enough to me.
All right.
Great.
Because we have a guest here, I'm gonna just continue down the agenda currently, so let's go to the skip the stuff ordinance. And I'm gonna give the floor to Christina so she can tell us more about this ordinance and.
And you guys have it in your packet.
No, but I have paper copies that I will pass around.
Is this single-use food waste?
Single-use foodware accessories, but
Okay.
I don't.
Oh.
Thank you. Those food
Yeah,
serviceware, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, yep, I got it.
So I had come in a while ago, like a year,
Probably, yeah.
probably like a year ago, and I believe that I presented both on Skip the Stuff and the reusable pilot. But it might have been just Skip the Stuff. But basically here's where we got to, which is a traditional skip the stuff or take out foodware accessories upon request ordinance. So there are 83 laws within the United States, 2 of them at the state level in California and Washington, and all the rest are at the municipal or county level. And the great thing about it is that it's really, it's a low bar. And so all you're doing is you're switching takeout accessories from opt out by default to opt in. And yes, there are some restaurants that do this already, but certainly not all of them. And there's multiple places I can think of right now in Portsmouth that throw not only enough for the order, but much, much more. And then we all know that most people are going home or to an office. They don't need these items. They end up in a drawer until at such point you realize you're never going to use them and you throw them in the trash. And that trash is the municipal waste stream. So yes, they may seem light, but you're continuously adding to the tonnage there, which is costing taxpayers money to dispose of. They are not recyclable, these items. Less than 6% of all plastics are recycled anyway, and it's typically only 1s and 2s that have a chance. So needless to say, these items are extremely wasteful, but the other benefit is to the restaurants. They're not going to spend the money on those items that aren't needed, right? So it reduces costs from restaurants. The Green Restaurant Association, or the CEO of the Green Restaurant Association, estimated about $5,000 a year. Obviously, that varies depending on the size of the restaurant and how much takeout. This does cover third-party delivery services like Uber Eats and Grubhub. So you'll notice some have that option anyway, that you check the box if you want the utensils. I think White Heron uses Toast, right? Toaster, so they'll have that
Toasters.
option, yeah, to put that, and it's not on everything, but some of them have an opt-in. White Heron is a certified ocean-friendly restaurant through the Surfrider Foundation, which I'm on the campaigns coordinator for. And ocean-friendly restaurants by default are complying with this because it's one of the requirements to become certified. So we have the Press Room, White Heron, Flatbread. I think those are the only ones in Portsmouth, and then we have other restaurants in New Hampshire. So there is business support for this. And the reason to make it an ordinance is so that it's a level playing field for everybody and to eliminate customer confusion. So if a customer goes to one restaurant and they get accessories and they're used to that, and they go to another restaurant, pick it up, they don't have the accessories that they wanted, they might be mad and leave a bad review. And really that restaurant was trying to do the right thing. So it creates that, and businesses come and go. We all have seen so many restaurants turn over in Portsmouth. So this means they would come in under that ordinance. That's the expectation. And I want to let Jess talk about how it ties into the CAP and state level source reduction goals, right? We're so far behind, and I think we all know that Portsmouth is a real leader in the state. This would just help us take another step forward. With the enforcement piece, I want to know everything's pretty straightforward, but I'm happy to answer questions. So the health department is in charge of enforcing, because this is what an inspector would just have another box added on their checklist, right? When they go into the restaurants to make sure that this is happening. And our goal is not to fine businesses, right? They can issue a letter that says, hey, you're not complying. We need you to comply. But I added a line, and I don't know, because the copy that Kate Cook had sent me didn't have it in it. I just want to see if the sustainability committee is mentioned in this one. I don't see it. But one of the things we had thought of, and so it still could be added at this point. We talked about the burden being on the health department, and that being maybe a challenge. So I had thought that in terms of the education outreach and kind of that initial help with enforcement, could be potentially done by the Sustainability Committee. So, this is a body that is well, well connected, in a way that I think would allow that go-between between the city and the businesses, to do that initial education so that restaurants are on board. I mean, we all know with the polystyrene ordinance, there are many restaurants that, not many, there are restaurants that are not complying. And, it's great to go there and do an inquiry first, right? And say, hey, what's impeding you from, is it the cost? Is it, you don't know the alternatives? Do you not even know that it's an ordinance? So anyway, that was my thinking. Again, I don't see that in this version. But that's something that we had talked about. So, and this does cover, you see in the definition, so it's all the utensils, stirs, napkins, toothpicks, I mean, anything that you're throwing in those to-go bags, condiments. And it's, again, just that the customer has to ask. They can have all those items, and this is not prescribing what those items are made of, just that they need to ask for them.
And these amendments, Kate Cook is bringing them to the city council, is that right?
Well, so
Or
thi-
has she already?
So this is what originally, I had sent her a model, and then she did, plugged everything in, sent it back, and then I suggested that just, there's one line, I can pull it up. So I thought it would be in here, so I don't know if she just forgot to put it in, or if there was any discussion that she wanted to have, or, I think it would be good for you all to consider whether that would be a good option or not.
The education and outreach section to be sustainability committee instead of the health department.
To partner with the health
Oh, to
department, so
partner.
that where the health
Okay.
department has the right to partner with the sustainability committee for those
Great.
efforts.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so you wouldn't be responsible for the whole thing. It would be a matter of the health department reaching out and saying, we could use help with this piece.
I would, oh, go ahead. Well, I would just gonna say, that from like a city perspective and looking at the cap and looking at Portsmouth Climate Future Enabling Actions, the most recent thing, this is definitely very in line. If you look at the sustainable waste management, one of the actions is to implement a zero waste plan, which would see the Portsmouth community reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost at least 90% of its solid waste. So this is clearly in line with reducing its solid waste. And I actually appreciate this. The very next one speaks to skip the stuff specifically and creating a voluntary certification program for Portsmouth restaurants. But I think this is a stronger avenue to actually have a city ordinance that speaks to it. But again, skip the stuff is talked about as an action in the upcoming climate action plan, so it feels very in line with those pieces and what we see part of our role as in supporting efforts around the climate action plan. And as Christina alluded to, it's also in line with NHDES and their new efforts and goals, or updated, I guess, not necessarily new, about reducing our solid waste as a state. So it feels in line with that goal at a state level also. Kate, do you want to talk? I was not able to attend when they presented at city council, but I did watch the meeting. And I did hear the council refer it to us as well as legal, and then to review it again at the next city council meeting. I took from that in watching it that, was presented to us to see if it was something that we were in support of, and that would be our vote. And do we support these efforts? Kate had also talked about, there's still some work on the language. Legal hasn't had a chance to thoroughly review it. I think Kristen might have some things that she wants to say from the health department about it. So I would just put it out to all of you as to what you feel comfortable with our action being in. Do you want to see a final draft of this ordinance, or are we comfortable in voting tonight and saying, yes, we're in support of the theme of this ordinance and its goals and in its intention, and we will defer to legal and the health department for whatever final verbiage needs to be in it so that it is in line with our policies and procedures. Chaz?
I just have a question. So have you seen have you seen any partnerships? You were mentioning California, I think Washington.
City
Um,
level, yeah.
So I think it was in California, but I know in Europe, it's really, really popular that when you do get to go, it's even a further push where it's in a reusable container that comes back and you always get a discount. Um, I don't know if that's pushing it too far, but I know that there's companies out there that also partner. And so that you get a discount on whatever your beverage is if you bring in a reusable cup. And I don't want to make this overly complicated so it doesn't move forward, but is there a window of it seems like there's also an opportunity as we're forming this to look at that. And
That could kind of be Christina's next presentation because she's working on a pilot right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
that
it's
she can
hopefully
speak
gonna
to.
start in March.
okay,
And we have 2 restaurants in Portsmouth and 2 in Dover. The containers are currently being shipped and they're double wall stainless steel and it's that system. So we're hoping to provide proof of concept first. We're gonna do a 6-month pilot, collect a lot of data, write up case studies, and then we will come back to the sustainability committee and city council and say, here's what we learned.
so just a very, very short example. One of my favorite cafes in Southern California is called Creation Cafe. And they would give all their there was like smoothies and acai bowls and stuff way before smoothies and acai bowls were at every corner. But with that, you would get them in a glass container, as a nice thick glass container. And then when you brought it back, it was like $1.50 or $2. And a lot of people I knew, that was like the only thing that they kept on their countertop and would go back to the store. And they were very loyal customers because they'd bring that back and they'd return it for $2 and then spend like 15 on the next smoothie.
Right.
But it really increased their business. So if you're looking for like proof of concept or example case studies, Creation Cafe just.
Well, I
Yeah.
should say we have
Yeah.
tons of case studies around the country, but it's
Right.
proving it here
Right,
for this community.
Right.
And I'm sure you know, in New Hampshire, whenever we mention California, people are like, this is not California, right? Yeah, and I will, yeah.
Christina, what's the name of this program you're talking about now, the pilot?
So reusable Seacoast, and my partner in Dover is Christine Baber.
Yeah.
And we are using Foodware, which is based out of California. So reusable San Mateo ran it with Foodware. Spacing on some other names, but yes.
Great.
But so, oh yeah, is there
Lee
somebody
has his
on?
hand up.
Oh, Lee, sorry.
No, thank you. I actually was interested a little bit more in how you were going to leverage that pilot to educate other restaurant owners in terms of the types of eco-friendly disposables that are available to them, right? So, plant fiber, bamboo, that kind of thing. How do we as a group and as a community educate those restaurant owners as to what those affordable options are? Not everybody can afford the same, I'll say, level of replacement in terms of eco-friendly types of disposables. What are we, what's the approach in terms of educating?
I think you're speaking to a couple of things. So for Skip the Stuff, it's not asking people to change anything of what they have already. It's just asking, instead of just automatically throwing in all of those disposable items into the bag, the customer has to actually ask you for them, regardless of whatever they're made out of, plastic or what. What Christina's reusable pilot is something different from that, and getting restaurants to engage in using reusable containers. For me, that's why this seems like an easy ordinance to support, because it's not really requiring any, it's shifting behavior slightly. So instead of just having to say, no, I don't want it, you have to say, yes, I would like it. Instead of mandating restaurants or anybody else to do anything, or telling them they can't use this or they can't do that, or those kinds of things. So it's just a very slight shift that might be a little bit more palatable and easier for hopefully other ordinances down the road that might start to talk about some of the things you're bringing up.
That's
Yeah, and I like that from a consumer side of the business, but I'd love to see that as sort of an opportunity to educate restaurant owners into the things that are available to them. So that even what they do stick into a bag when a consumer says, I do want, a plate, or I do want some kind of, dinnerware, or, eating utensils. Great. The option that I'm going to stick in that bag is actually going to be eco-friendly.
There is,
Yeah.
yeah, there, I
Do you
mean,
have
there is a
anything?
version, Skip the Stuff 2.0, that does just that. It is more difficult to pass.
Yeah.
And get support for, because you are asking restaurants to change their inventory, change what they're ordering. So the good thing about this current version is that it's a low bar, it allows a point of entry, and then you can build on it. I think trying to think about what is enforceable, because a policy, what good is it if you can enforce it, right? So thinking about that piece, and what is palatable, what is doable, it moves the needle, and then you can build on it.
Oh, Bert?
Somebody else want to say something?
I think-
Well, I like what Lee said, and I'm just wondering if, and maybe it's not needed at this time. Add something about this, what he's talking about under the education and outreach to advise on when, I think, Lee, if I heard you correctly, when a customer does ask for a single use, that we educate the restaurant owners on what is available. Right, so instead of plastic, is there, other materials, right? Silverware, and anything but. Or if you give out napkins, don't give out the napkins that come in a little plastic bag, right? So, those types of things, we don't have to write in the specifics, but maybe, like Lee said, it would be a nice little piece to put in under education, educate the restaurant owners.
Yeah, and this says, B says, education outreach shall at a minimum include. So I think that
Yeah.
there's a window there to add, and this is, have input into what else you would like to see in there. I will, Jess is eyeing me because you have to be cautious about compostables and bioplastics. So those actually mimic traditional petrochemical plastic in the environment. If they're not taken to a industrial composting facility, they're actually found to contain petrochemical derived plastic and chemicals. So, not to get too far into that, but there's regrettable substitutes, I guess. And then there are real fiber-based, disposable substitutes that would be much, better. Ideally, you just don't give them out if they're not needed, right? You just don't even go there. And ideally for on-site, you have reusable silverware and then there are sometimes, right, where you will need disposables, and can they be the best thing they can be? And I think it's really like this committee. I think that makes so much sense for this committee to research and make those recommendations in terms of what, there's so much knowledge here about what that looks like, right?
I think we should vote to move this forward from the committee perspective. I'm a big believer in the small incremental changes. If you try to, what is it, make a perfect the enemy of good or something. I think this is great what we have here. If we try to do any more than this at any given time, it just gets hung up. It takes longer. There's more pushback. I think
Kristen? Sorry, Herb, do you have anything else you want?
Sorry, I was trying to do that nonchalantly.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to just make a couple comments from the health department perspective. We just got eyes on this very recently. And we have some issues that will need to be worked through for how this is currently presented. And I want the group to be aware of that, that as it's currently written, we or would not be in favor of it because of some outstanding issues that exist for us with the language in here, but we're very eager to work on it. I actually am would like to follow up with Lee's comment. We would love to make this become no plastics and that go with the fiber-based. If we're going to do this, let's do this now. We are in favor of removing all the plastics. That's one of the issues for us for enforcement that would be difficult on inspection on determining who's using what where. How is the plastic that they have going to be used? We probably can't enforce it the way some people might be envisioning this currently based on that. So if we were throwing a hat in the ring, we'd say go for it. Why don't we make that change right now and get the plastic out of Portsmouth? That's my perspective, but the health department is very eager to work on this.
Can I just, is it about enforcement? Is that the piece of it that the health department needs to look through a little bit further?
No, there's some like, well, it's mostly under the enforcement piece. Well, you should all be aware that we do not license the third-party vendors. We would have no say or control over what they do or do not do with their apps in Portsmouth in general. There's nothing that we would be able to do with regard to whether they were being compliant with the policy in Portsmouth. And and there's some issues with the enforcement and compliance sections based on existing city ordinances that would have to be adjusted. So we need to get with legal on that part.
Happy?
Kristen, do you have
Yep.
any time frame for that kind of legal review?
We are hoping to get their ear as soon as possible. We had sent a few comments upstairs already, so we're waiting to hear back on that. I'm not sure if Kate has any updates on that or not. I didn't get to see her this afternoon.
Yeah, sorry, I was working from home, Kristen, but for legal, so the main person in legal, Susan Morel, who goes through our ordinances and provides us a lot of feedback on this, is on vacation right now, and she'll be back for March, I believe. But what we have been talking about with legal is that if we really do want to see a finalized version come back to sustainability committee that's gone through legal, gone through planning, gone through health with any edits need to be made, that we'll have to push back the council date of when we send this back to council. So I know that at the city council meeting on February 5th, Councilor Cook referred it to legal and us simultaneously for review to come back for a report on March 18th. And currently with our timeline, with legal's timeline and health's timeline to review it, we couldn't get it down here before then because we don't have a meeting before March 18th to do a second review. So one option, if we do want to vote to see the final version, is that we can set up a special meeting for the Sustainability Committee and then have it reviewed and referred back to City Council for their April 1st meeting. So we would have to have a special meeting before our next March committee meeting, which is the 28th. So that's where we've sort of been talking about. Legal is definitely caught up for a week or two in getting to this, and they had a very hectic start to February and they were slammed. So it's totally understandable. And planning and health, like Kristen said, we hadn't seen this and we heard about it when Josh emailed us and you emailed asking for to be put on the agenda, and we were looking at it and we're like, oh my gosh, this involves health and this involves planning, and we hadn't really heard about it since then. So we definitely need a little bit more time to review. But
So Kate, are you saying we might have it before the March 28th meeting so that we could review it?
well, yeah, so I think the goal is to get everybody's input in terms of staff by early March, or at least the first 2 weeks of March. And then if the Sustainability Committee would like, I mean, obviously we'll send around our final draft, but if we'd like to vote on the specific final edits, then we would have to do that at a meeting that's before our March 28th meeting, so that it can make it into the packet in time.
I
for the
see, to
April
get on
1st.
the agenda for April 1st.
Right.
we
I
have-
think
Yeah,
it's due, the packet for city council is due by March 26th.
Yeah.
So we'd have to have a meeting before then, or we could move up a regular meeting and just have it week before or 2 weeks before, whatever works for people, but we would need to make sure that we have a quorum in attendance, which I think we decided was 5 people, so that's not too bad, 5 or 6 people.
Sorry, does this team have any objection to as it is?
This team is in the committee.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like our team is okay with as it is, and then legal needs to go through.
But it will be further changed,
Right.
so we don't know.
Right, I think what Kristen touched on is that the enforcement could definitely be tweaked, just because health currently doesn't have a lot of the power to enforce some of this stuff. So that could see some major changes, but I think most of the language is just light tweaks, or at least stuff that we all supported when we looked through it this week.
Is it helpful or unhelpful if I were to send the language for the 2.0 version or a marked up second version that includes that, if you want to have it not just be a bond request, but upon request, you can give only non-plastic bioplastic items. Do you want to see that or just leave that out?
It's funny, so myself and the health department had a great conversation this week, because we went through it line by line. And that was the first thing that they talked about wanting to change, is make everything just biodegradable only. But the further we thought about it, the more we thought about state laws, and we really don't have that power as a municipality to constrict what businesses can and cannot purchase. So we'd love that language if you have it, but I think for right now, this is the step that we can make,
Mm-hmm.
and I support the idea of it.
Yeah, I mean, that was something I was thinking about too, in terms of enabling legislation and sort of thing.
So,
Are we allowed to change our meeting dates?
Well,
I don't
I'm
see
gonna make a suggestion. We're allowed to do anything we want.
Even as a standing committee?
I assume.
Rules haven't been made yet.
Kristen, thank you. One, my end result is to move this along as quickly as possible. I like what you said. Basically, it's the low-hanging fruit. It empowers people to do what a lot of people want to do, is to do something that they won't know about, but I think it's moving in the right direction. What I heard, if I heard correctly, we could say conceptually, the committee has looked at it, has heard a presentation by Kristen, and that we are in favor of the conceptual framework with people working on the language. And when the legal comes through before our meeting, or as soon as it is, we could ship it out to everybody on the committee. And we would say, we've already approved it. If anybody has any objections, then we could start. But I think it's getting down into the real nitty gritty, where I would trust almost anybody here to work with it. And I don't, and here's the other point. We're going to talk about what's the purpose of this committee. And like this, it's the state of where the whole world is. If we get too much involved with the wrong things, we are not going to accelerate and scale if we're doing things that are just making us feel good. And everybody likes to skip a straw, everybody. So where is our real leverage point? And I don't have an answer for that. So I'm listening. I'm trying to do what I can with what I got where I am. You are, and all of us are here. This is what's in front of us. It's a low-hanging fruit. It's a relatively no-brainer. And it's going to get some, and even if it gets some negative feedback, we're talking about the issue, which we weren't. So I would say a motion to pass it in conceptual framework and not to have another meeting unless we need one. Does that, I don't know if that would be satisfying.
Lee?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got to take myself off of mute here. So I understand that we don't have the authority to dictate both to platforms and to businesses. Does this have any intent to cover public spaces where we are actually as a city funding that? And so my question here is it something that we could implement and enforce with our school lunch programs and things like that?
So in the definition for food service provider,
Yeah.
um,
That doesn't fall.
yeah, it doesn't, so,
Okay. Fair enough.
um, a school cafeterias, meaning more like privately owned,
Yeah.
I mean, it can, that's the thing, right? You can make it, but it's, again, this is on accessories upon request for a takeout order, right? And then, so then it becomes a little bit different when you're talking about, food service in, yeah, like a school setting.
We also already have a city ordinance about single-use plastic on city property.
Right.
So, I know there are some contingencies and caveats there, so maybe that is worth a conversation again, is reviewing what that looks like, and to address your point, what that means for schools, Lee.
I would love to see us set an example as a city then, and with the younger generation as well, who actually is concerned about this, to use things like, bamboo plates and, birch wood dinnerware and or flatware and things like that actually would go in our schools and set an example. At any rate, I'll leave it at that.
The middle school, some of the students who do the TED Talks unit with Chris Rose, got the cafeteria to switch over to reusable flatware. So that's really what we would like to see for on-site dining in schools or any facilities, would be actual washable reusables, because even if the item is wood or bamboo, there's still energy and materials that have to go into making that item, and then it's just disposed of. So whether it's landfilled or if it is truly compostable or backyard compostable, that happens. There's still energy, water, resources that go into making it. So anytime, there's some great reports from Upstream Solutions about how reusables went out over, single-use items, no matter what they're made out of. So that's, anyway, the schools have made some moves in that way, and would love to see them go further with washable trays and getting the dishwasher up and running at Little Harbor School. Yeah.
Kristen?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple other points. And Lee, to follow up on what you just asked, one of the edits that the health department has potentially for this is to include the schools and our recreation programs in that definition of food service provider, so it's clear. So that we actually had that noted down already. And I wanted to just let you all know that the education piece is something we look forward to actually being able to implement to all of our facilities. That's something that we are definitely on board with participating in, and that shouldn't be difficult for us to do. And as an aside, we had someone approach us, and we are referring them to the sustainability fair, possibly to get a table there. And it is a company, I cannot remember the name, I apologize that I didn't write it down today, of a company that provides the more fiber-based sugarcane or something like that based products for restaurants, and the prices are comparable to the other types of compostables that are out there. So we're going to encourage them to come to the sustainability fair for FaceTime with people, and if that's a direction that we want to go in, possibly we can figure out that as a part of the education to our facilities as well, which we are very willing to do. I think that's it for those two pieces. Thank you.
I think to answer what Bert says about trying to leverage and accelerate, scale and accelerate, in the waste management section of the climate action plan that's coming along, one thing is to analyze the composition of our waste streams in Portsmouth and to implement a zero waste plan. So that's kind of the bigger umbrella that we're talking about. And a zero waste plan means we'll be reducing, reusing, recycling, and composting at least 90% of our solid waste. So, you know, this is great and it will fit right in with that. But I would make a pitch. I think the changes that the health department is considering are big enough that we should wait to see the actual amendments is what I would vote for. But Bert's motion, I think, is on the
I
floor.
didn't make it as a motion yet. And on one more clarification, when you originally were saying that you like to take a little bit off the health inspection and put it over, then you put it over to this committee being a volunteer once a month. I think where I went with that is we are going to be talking later tonight about 5 community conversations. And so that's where I see what Effie and what Bill will be talking about is how we continually connect the CAP. And what I like about this is I think in some ways it's not a big reducing item. What I'm seeing is we're trying to, all of us, change our own culture and change the culture of our community. And like what you just said in the discussion, better not use single use. I remember when I was at Little Harbor, all the trays were washed. And then they told us how much better it was going to be for, so I think we need to look in a long-term view. What kind of culture do we want in Portsmouth that's going to be sustainable for the long term and really accelerate the cultural shift? And this, I feel, is an easy one, and it would fit into our conversations. We wouldn't be reinforcers, but I'm thinking our committee, and this will be open for discussion, is connecting to accelerate and scale through community actions like Portsmouth Climate Action or Seacoast Can, and get the coordination going in a stronger way. So that's, I think we can say, yes, we have city status and we're in favor. And then I think we turn it over to the nonprofits to go and do the community education, not enforcement.
So would you be willing to restate what you had previously said as a motion for this committee to?
Absolutely not. I'll
vote on?
ask Effie or Fred, who are good at putting something into words, because I do word spaghetti. So I can try and then they can translate. My wife, I write one email and she translates it 5 different times, so I finally get one.
Wait, before I do that, Kristen has her hand up again.
I'm sorry, one last word. I apologize for not being there in person. Just to circle back to the single-use disposables policy that's in place, it does not include the flatware. It's just disposable cups, disposable containers, and disposable straws. And then there's a side note about carry-out bags. So the current policy we have in place that we enforce at city events held on city property or by the city itself does not include any of the flatware or condiment, anything like that. So revisiting that is not a bad idea. And that's I promise I won't interject again. Thank you.
Okay, my motion is that the Sustainability Committee is in favor conceptually of the single-use food service ware reduction. What we have. That we are giving our support to it with the knowledge that some of the language will be changing from legal and other entities who are going to be looking at it. And we will review it. We reserve the right to review it if there's any of the language that we feel is not going to be productive. But other than that, if we send it around and there's no objection, then I could say, then maybe we can meet the timelines. That's kind of where I want to go with it.
The only thing I'll add to that is if we do want to review the final version and we send it around, we can't do anything via email for regular business. So we'd either have to schedule a second meeting or create a working group or like a subcommittee that we assign the task of final review.
So if we go around, when do we think we might get a draft to look at?
I believe city attorney is on vacation for another 2 weeks, so she wouldn't be able to look at it until this last few days of the first week of March, the second week of March. So
And when is the council meeting we're shooting for?
So, we can go to the April 1st meeting. Counselor Cook advised that it go back to the March 28th meeting. But, the council packet for that meeting is due like it's the Tuesday before the meeting. So it would be due.
Did you say Wednesday, Kate, the
Tuesday.
27th,
Um,
March 27th?
I thought this was a calendar. So it's, city council has a meeting March 18th that they wanted us. Where the heck were all the dates? Okay, Tuesday before, so it would have to be in by Tuesday, the 12th. Is when the final review would have to be done. To be put into the city council packet to make it onto the original deadline.
Like Tuesday, the 12th. And and we might have it a week before then in our hands?
Sounds like legal might not even be done
Legal
then.
might have it in their hands, but they might.
Now, let me ask this.
they're-
What is if we were behind a month or two, what difference will?
Well, if you go into April, you're going into Earth Month, right? 'Cause the Earth Day's on the 22nd, so it could be like a Earth Month thing.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any real,
urgency in terms of getting the policy? Is there, from your legally, does anybody see any real urgency that if it was a month later?
I feel that the changes sound like they're significant enough that we should wait to see what comes from legal and the health department.
And let's see at our next meeting and we'll approve it and then it'll go into the filing. Well, we won't do it.
Yeah, and if Kate Cook had been able, if Counselor Cook had been able to be here, she might have expressed a different preference, but I understand she has to be at the other meeting, so.
So my motion is that we wait till we get the final review. And we are right now generally in favor and we'll give a final approval at our next meeting.
Not to be even more annoying, but I'll just add in, so talking to the city manager about potentially wanting us all to review. I think the preference is that if we can't make that March 18th city council meeting, we should try as hard as we can to make the April 1st city council meeting, because a city councilor gave us a hard deadline. We really shouldn't try to push this off. So that was the city manager's recommendation, that if we can't make March 18th, we try to make April 1st if possible, which will require moving our regular meeting up a week or adding a second meeting. Not to confuse.
Because that means
everybody.
it has to get
That would mean
in
that
by
we,
March 27th.
it would have to be approved by March 26th to get into the city council.
So if we moved up the meeting to March 21st.
Yep, so if, we'll definitely have a final version ready by March 21st, and we could send it around to everybody a week before so they can review on their own. We come to a meeting March 21st. And vote on it, and go through the changes, and that would give us 5 days as staff to incorporate any red line changes and throw in the packet.
And you think we'd be able to have it before the 21st to look at it?
I definitely think so. I know legal will be here the second week at least, so we can really make it a priority to get it done as soon as possible,
So we would move up the March meeting of this
Up by
committee up by
a week. I don't know what people's plans are for March, so that might be dicey, and we don't have everybody here tonight, which is also.
Should we do a show of hands, just who's here, who can come?
Just need 5, right?
We need 5,
And Kate doesn't count.
don't count.
'Cause you
Peter
said-
counts, but
Oh, Peter counts?
so technically I'm taking Peter's place.
It should be designated as a
So I
county.
could count.
I thought for some reason city staff couldn't
Oh.
vote.
I think, well, I guess maybe not now, but in the way that we're drafting the rules,
Oh, okay.
perhaps.
But regardless, I think we could.
I'm sorry, I didn't see if Lee raised his hand. Yeah, okay.
He raised
So
his thumb.
that's- Yeah.
Yes, I can make it.
I guess
So
maybe we
it
should-
sounds like then the recommendation at this point is to wait for a final draft to review. To bump up our next month's meeting a week to March 21st, so that we can vote at that time and still get it to city council for their April 1st meeting.
Correct. Is that a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
Right, second.
All those in favor?
I,
All right, great. There we go.
One thing I'll add on to that is we may not have this room available that night, but if we don't, then I'll try to book it in either council chambers or school board room, or maybe the Levinson room if it's available. So be on the lookout for a room change.
Okay. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Christina.
You're welcome. And
possibly.
just to clarify, sorry, just to clarify, so still send that language to you, even though there's,
The 2.0 version?
Yeah.
I think it would be
and I'll send it to the,
beneficial, yeah, just to
Department.
see what we can work with. And then if that's something that, is going to legislature, that we can support.
okay.
And is the school piece something that becomes part of this, or should that be looking back at the current city ordinance and amending that?
I think that because that's already on city property and this, it's a little wonky to try to fit it in to this, like, that's just from a policy perspective, I think.
I
So that's a future agenda meeting, reviewing that ordinance.
Yeah, talking with health, I know they, in the food service provider definition, they were interested in adding school and recreational concession stands to that. So we'll probably go around with that if we can.
Okay,
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm gonna head out because I have a call.
Christina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I did not post the agenda anywhere, but does anybody have a preference about where we head next? Anything? Of what we've done the first few? Anything calling out to anybody? What's next? Okay, if nobody has, then we'll just keep going in order. So the next one is small gas engines and the community education and awareness.
Small gas engines, okay. Yeah, this one is easy. So last month I presented on small gas engines, and the proposal was to look at or consider a rebate program for lawnmowers and things of that nature, which is happening all over the country. These rebate programs, Massachusetts is really big on rebate programs for electric lawn equipment. One of the questions that came up during the meeting was, are we on the uptick of needing to motivate people to move to electric lawn equipment? Are we starting to plateau, or are we on the downhill side? And the point being, if we're gonna spend the time and money, is the juice worth the squeeze? And are people already headed towards electric lawn equipment? Do we need to incentivize them any more than they already are, what's currently available? And it's a really good question. So what I've done for this month is I'm coming back to this group to say, to propose that we do an education campaign. So through the process of researching the rebate program, we gathered a lot of great information, so we could turn that into an education campaign. And through the city's website and through the library and a number of folks, we could build out a campaign and get the word out to the community on what the advantages are of moving towards electric lawn equipment. I think the library would be happy to work with us on it, for example. And we have so much great content that we collected that we could easily set up a web page off a sustainability page on the city website. We could draft a article for the city newsletter with a link to the information, link to the web page. So this to me feels like it's low-hanging fruit. And when you look at how much effort would it take to run this education campaign versus the benefit, I think the benefit's high and the amount of work is extremely low because we've already done most of the footwork already.
Effie?
So Herb, one thing I want to ask about was, did you submit this for the cap at all?
To do education,
Yeah,
About-
to address small gas engine appliances. I didn't see it in there, so I was just wondering.
no, I did not. And the cap has gotten really slimmed down.
Yeah,
Specifics like
So-
this, I don't think are in the cap.
right, they did generalize a lot of things.
But in the cap, I think there is a goal or to reduce the usage of. And maybe not, I thought, to
I
start,
didn't see it, but one thing
Yeah.
I did see that connected with it, I followed up after your email, was on Bright Action.
Yeah.
Under the Clean Energy Home. It doesn't specifically have this, but I think that would be a great tie-in. And then we could do the newsletter featuring this specifically,
yeah. and I
rather than
think-
creating platforms. I'm not sure how much the city is going to be able to do with this. I don't want to answer for the city. But I think it's a great idea, but we have this vehicle, Bright Action, that we could use, and you can write the resources and the write-up, and then we have to get it into Bright Action. It doesn't exist as such yet.
Herb, in doing your research, did you find any really great examples of similar outreach and education? And is it ever cities partnering with businesses? I mean, there's probably, if there is such a thing, it's probably exactly the same information that you'd want to use here.
Well, yeah, there's hundreds of cities that have, at least a page on electric lawn equipment. More specifically, what was your question about?
Whether you
municipalities
found
partnering
content
with-
that you could repurpose for Portsmouth.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
and does it involve examples of working with the retailers and dealers? So they might be a conduit for information as well.
Well, the
You went to Home
rebate,
Depot, you could get a marketing brochure there.
those that have rebate programs, they typically have partnered with somebody like an Ace, a Lowe's.
How about
or a Home
education
Depot.
without rebate, which is what you're talking about?
We could look at that. I mean, I'm not sure what the advantages are of
Examples
examples.
of marketing, yeah. but
Yeah.
or-
Oh, yeah, examples of marketing there's probably literally 100 municipalities across the country that we could borrow from.
Yeah.
But writing the content is the easy part. I mean, that's a really short, small effort.
So what it would take for the city is maybe a link to, it could be hosted at Portsmouth Climate Action, for example, or Seacoast Can website. That wouldn't have to, all the material wouldn't have to be on the city website. It would make it much easier for the city, like the Planning and Sustainability Committee, to say, here's this information on this important program, go to Portsmouth Climate Action website.
Kate, if I just gave you the content, how hard is it for one of the web admins to just throw up another page.
What sort of content would it be? Would it link to specific brands or?
Nope. We would just talk about, similar to that proposal that we put together for a month ago. We just talk about, what the benefits are of transitioning to electric lawn equipment, what's the downsides of continuing to use, or the harm of continuing to use gas powered lawn
Yes.
equipment.
I think, I can't remember if Brian was here for that meeting too, Brian Getz from Public Works, but I think it would be something that we dual posted. So it would link on our page, sustainability, and also the Public Works. I don't know what subpage that would be, but I know he was interested in having it
Oh, for DPW.
for DPW as well. So, and then I think it would just be a matter of us reviewing the content just to make sure that it doesn't go like certain brands or companies, that it would be in line with our principles, but that should be easy to put up a webpage.
Yeah. But I think what we're talking about here is the city, but if PCA or Seacoast Can, is that what it's called now? I think there's nothing stopping those organizations from putting up anything on their website.
Can I ask you a clarifying question? So, and you sort of just answered it there. But are you sort of looking for feedback from the committee of if I produce this content and if we organize this education, would this committee support this efforts? Or are you looking for somebody?
No, such as a proposal. I could throw the content together. It's literally minutes to put it together.
Right. But I'm also thinking like if we're talking about the library, is that something that you and Chad
I-
or whoever are gonna
happy to-
initiate and coordinate that whole
Yeah,
thing?
I'm
Or are you
happy to
looking for
reach
other
out to-
people to
What did I write in
help to
here?
lead that? Or what is your?
Collaborate with the city director of communications and community engagement, as well as the library supervisor of programming and outreach. I'm happy to talk with these folks.
So you're just kind of looking for this committee to say, yes,
This is
we
the
support
proposal.
this effort, go run with it?
This is something I think is low hanging fruit, and this committee, it's something we could accomplish very quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think the data that you presented with Steve a couple of months back about small gas engines that a lot of us hadn't heard before was compelling. My issue is with the city website, the sustainability page itself needs updating. And I don't like my perspective entirely, things coming in, a page from Herb, a page from Effie, a page from Evie, whatever. It to me, it's not how you do a website. And I liked Bill's idea of working with CCAN, Seacoast Climate Action Now, and having another subcommittee or project of CCAN. And we have Bright Action going where you could build on that platform, as well as the library, and then maybe the city website. But I would like to see this committee make a priority of updating the sustainability pages and having a clear idea of what our web pages should look like before we start adding pages in.
I also, oh, sorry, go ahead. Rick.
Seacoast Can, I don't know if you've looked at the website recently.
No.
They had a professional volunteer. It looks really good. Go on the website. I was impressed. And it has the different boxes. This could be another box.
The project boxes, like
Project
PCA is
boxes.
one, TCAG is one.
Brad,
And so, and I like the idea, you already have the passion, the interest, and you could connect to that. That I think is an appropriate site. And one of the things I think we need to talk about tonight, what is the mandate of our committee? And I'm feeling is we need to have a little dialogue about that. We can start on the small thing, which is the emails that go around. And what are we engaging to do? Because with a short time frame, I don't have answers to this, obviously. It's like we're volunteers, we're putting our best effort forth. Where does this committee, because now we have some clout. that we didn't have before. I'm still trying to figure out what that cloud is. So what we do makes a little bit different. And if we start doing a lot of little things, I would like to be more focused in what is our mandate, what are we trying to do, and then what's the best way to do it. And I think in some ways, when I started teaching, I used to have great lessons I used to like to do, but it had nowhere where I didn't know where I was really going. And I feel like in this committee, sometimes we're in that, did I just say spaghetti things or do you understand what I said?
Yeah, I understood what you said.
So maybe that would be my suggestion is look at the Seacoast scan. And I'd like us to have either, I was going to put this under one of the things, the discussion, which this would fit in as a great example. You've changed my behavior, and every time I look at it, every day I see this. So I think it's a great topic. I'm just not sure what this committee's role should be in doing it.
Building off of that and looping back to what you were sharing. I remember when I first interviewed to join a sustainability and foundation team in San Francisco, and I asked where the vision is of where she wanted the foundation and the sustainability team to go. And she said, I want it to disappear. And I said, what do you mean by that? And what she was saying is that she wanted to integrate into everything that's done naturally. That doesn't have to be it didn't have to be a separate group. It's just built into the way that the organization worked. And what I'm connecting that to is the idea of enabling heretics. And Seth Godin talks a lot about this in Tribes. He's written tons of books, but one of them was Enable Heretics. Give people the power to create these small changes and it all comes together. So enabling these grassroots things. And when I see an example like this particular program of switching over to electric vehicles, or not electric vehicles, sorry, electric lawn equipment. I just talk about electric vehicles a lot, but electric lawn equipment or getting rid of single-use plastic that's just forced upon people is keeping that thinking hat on of what can we do to enable these people that are passionate, fired up, and taking all these approaches to push this forward? How can we be enablers? How can we be a group of enablers so that everyone that's sinking their time, they're researching their passion to make their small push forward in one direction and all these different directions, how can we enable everyone so that when we have stories to share, as we're now starting to get some clout, but we have these stories to share of all these wins and how we enabled all these community members to actually have those wins. So like I would, if throwing my perspective in it, it would be, how can we enable all of these grassroots efforts in all the different areas and share the stories and use the megaphone of the city to get that out to other community members or the other people that live in Portsmouth. These are all the changes that are being made and you can join in on it. So I would say from a high level, I would say enable the change makers, enable the heretics, but enabling all the different things that people are trying to do.
And I would add, I appreciate Effie's point. I think the sustainability committee webpage and what that is needs some updating and revision now that we are a standing committee and we have this clout. But I see this as a huge resource for somebody who's trying to search the city website and see what we do from a sustainability perspective. And you know, even if that's literally what it is a resource page, and there's just a list of these efforts that people have taken to undergo and learn about this and share what they've learned and help community members understand of, you want to understand more about small engines and their impact on the environment, here, you click this link and wherever it takes you, that can be decided, but here's a resource about all the information about small engines and this is why you should be shifting to electric. And I would hate to impede that effort because I think that's hugely valuable. Like from what Steve and what you have all shared about the impacts, I had no idea that small engines were so significant. So I definitely think there needs to be broader education about that.
I think one of the things the sustainability page and committee can do is put all these good efforts into a broader context. I mean, the cap is one broader context, just the concept of sustainability in the 3 E's is a broader context. So then it really avoids being one more thing. Now we're talking about single use. Now we're talking about gas. Now we're talking about bikes. I mean, I think that there can be some cohesion, and that can be part of the rethinking of the page. But I think maybe the more substance that's on the page and that's under the auspices of this committee, maybe the more useful and more relevant we are. But I think our challenge is to put it into a context. And I think that's really what sustainability is all about.
I'm sorry, you go.
Yeah, and one of our powers and duties as the committee, I have it here, is increasing awareness of sustainable practices among residents, businesses, visitors, municipal staff, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, getting it out there is really important. I just wonder about the mechanism.
Yeah. I just want to comment on what Bert said, I think is foundational in that I've been on the committee now for 2 years. And I've brought this up a number of times, but I've yet to see us sit down and prioritize our goals for this year, the next year, and build any kind of roadmap, which concerns me. And so it then becomes the onus on individuals like me to find something to pick up like this and say, hey, look, this is low hanging fruit. This is something I can go do. Because as a group, I don't know, we don't have any kind of prioritized goals. And I think that's a problem and something that needs to be remedied with this, especially now that this is a standing committee. I'm also a member of the Energy Advisory Committee. Well, we're in 2024 now, so the Energy Advisory Committee has been working on exactly this, a list of prioritized 2024 goals and what we are and aren't going to tackle within the year. So I think now that we're in the new year, or we're, partway through the new year, it's something we need to get a handle on. So I propose this. It's really easy. It's low hanging fruit. If the committee wants to take action on this, I'm happy to support it. Otherwise, I'm happy to let it go. And then for the sake of time, I'm running out because I promised Kate I would only use a little bit of time. Here's another proposal, and this is for a neighborhood tool share program, which we've talked about several times in this meeting. So I took the initiative and not only to continue talking about it, but I actually wrote out here content that is almost ready to be copied and pasted onto a website that is an outline for how an individual within the city of Portsmouth can get together with their neighbors and implement a tool share program. And I'm not going to go into all the benefits because we all know, everybody in the neighborhood doesn't need to own a snow blower. Everybody in the neighborhood doesn't need to own all this equipment. If you get together with your neighbors, you can share it. But this one, the electric lawn equipment, super easy and fast for me to generate content. This one, I've already generated the content for. And so I just put this out there. If the committee's interested in them, great. If not, we can move on to something else. So Kate, I do want to be respectful because I said we would only use a maximum of 14 minutes or so.
Be fast.
I think definitely interested. And I think Kate, did you send around what Herb is talking about or the slides?
PDF, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you should look at that and be ready to give a thumbs up next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Herb, I'm disappointed to hear you say either the committee takes it up or I let it go. I think you've got great issues and we're just trying to figure out the vehicle. So I
Yeah.
hope you hear that from the committee.
Oh,
And
I
it
do.
fits, and I understand where we need to have some goals, and I think we've been delayed thinking we had to wait for the climate action plan, and that's held us up some, but I think now that we're a standing committee, we
Yeah.
have to take next steps.
I don't think we can,
I-
unfortunately, I don't think we can wait for the climate action plan, right?
Right.
And nor necessarily should we.
What would you see as next steps for those two things?
Well, I would see the committee saying, yes, vote for, let's move forward on one or both of these proposals.
And then what happens?
You implement.
Who and how so?
Yeah.
I think those are the pieces that I'm just,
Yeah, so here, let's
we
take the
put that-
neighborhood tool share
yeah.
program, for example, and this, I recommended working with, on this one, working with, I think, the city director of communications and community engagement, supervisor of programming and outreach at the library. And then obviously with city staff to review, and this committee could review final content. And then put it out on the city website, add it to the newsletter. Get the word out there, and then work with the library, they put up posters, they do all sorts of stuff with community engagement.
Mhm.
I think one of the most useful things would be links to examples of successful practices, which you probably have included in that, so people would understand that this is, best practice, well established in other places for both of those
Okay, yeah, I mean, they're
links
links. And then where do those links go?
to cities that have done the same thing.
No, but, so you have a number of links of.
Like
well,
here
the
are
program, put that aside, because that's not a city thing.
either of those. Here are examples of 5 cities, Cleveland, Burlington, whatever. Here's the link to their program. Find out
Yeah.
about what they do.
And what happens with those links?
You go to more information. So it doesn't look like something Portsmouth just invented, but that there are other places that have done this, and Portsmouth can follow some well-established examples.
Well, we can build the content off of what the other cities have done, right? And we could do that in a matter of less than seconds from using AI,
Yeah,
right?
but I'm
Yeah.
just saying examples to say this has been done in 5 cities. Here are 5.
Yeah, sorry, let me re-ask my question. The links to these examples.
Yeah.
You copy and paste the links into somewhere.
Just
Who-
hyperlinks that would say, here are examples of 5 communities that have had a successful
Where do
small
those-
engine program.
The links, I'm saying, where do they go? But
Where do they go to? Or
you
where
have
do
the
they go
links.
from?
If I pasted the links on this page, then what happens?
Well, whatever web page it resides on then
Yeah.
has hyperlinks, and the content says, here's an example in Burlington, click here.
Yeah, I think we're missing each other. Maybe this is, Effie, you can word this differently. You have links and they're on this page.
Yes.
And now for this proposal, what happens next?
I'm assuming that this content is electronic content. It
Yeah.
resides someplace.
Yeah,
And if it resides there, then there are hyperlinks. You click the hyperlink, and if you're interested in tool sharing, it will take you to Burlington, and you can see that
So,
there's a newspaper article written about Burlington.
so you're saying if we put this on the city website, we put all these links to all these other municipalities.
It could be municipalities, it could be newspaper articles, it could be more information if you're interested in this. It's a great success in Burlington. Read more about it. It could be going to a newspaper article.
Okay,
I think it's probably more useful to think in terms of Seacoast Climate Action Now's website. And you really have to visit and see the new website, as Bert mentioned. But there's a number of projects listed, like RAD, the Recycling and
Yeah.
Waste Reduction, Climate Action Now, Portsmouth Climate Action. So there could be one, a circular economy, tool share on CCAN, but that would have to be set up. One thing I wondered about when I read your material about the tool share program was the citywide neighborhood committee. I don't know
Yeah.
if they have meetings of all the neighborhood leaders, and you could talk to them and say, look, this program, you might want to adopt. it."
There are constituencies,
Yeah.
are the 18 different committees, and I would say both of these things would be really interesting to them.
Yeah,
And that's why I wrote in here, not to get specifics or call anyone out, just to say, hey, look, I propose to work with certain groups here to build out the campaign.
Yeah.
Right, and so that would include communications to whoever knows.
I love our discussion because it's really clarifying some stuff, at least for myself. What you are talking about is useful, passionate, and of interest. Chaz, what you talked about is enabling. I think our committee can enable people with ideas to move forward and help them move forward. I'm aware as a volunteer committee, nothing happens unless the person who is volunteering to do it does it, because all of us are busy. So I'm hearing you have some passion to do this. I would love to do it because I even tell my wife about your stories. So you've got a good story, you have passion, and we're talking about this committee can give you, yes, the blue ribbon, the sustainability committee is in favor of this happening for our city. Now, where you put your energies, do you want to stay with this? Because, for example, Christina came here with this, skip this stuff, and she's going to do the retainable thing. That's been the work for 3 years by 2 different committees, and people have stuck with that one little item. And now Anne is still trying to do it. So I'm thinking that what you're proposing is, I'm hesitant just to put something up on a site. I want to support you. If that's where your passion is and you can do it, the committee could give you that kind of thing. I don't know if it needs to be a city sustainability project. Other use, like Portsmouth Listens worked with the city for years, and we met months in time, and they were endorsed by the sustainability committee. So they got their insurance. So I'm not clear where we're at, but what do we want the committee to be?
Yeah,
And each,
it's a good question.
there's a lot, I know what I've always thought it to be. It's looking at a high level picture of where we are and trying to get the best leverage we can to support moving forward. And I don't think I've ever thought us getting down to actually doing things ourselves, although that's where all of us are engaged almost as individuals. But that's just my view.
Yeah, I think the committee needs to take a step back then and figure out what is this committee? Especially now that it's a standing committee.
Well, yeah, I think we have it pretty clearly in the rewritten ordinance, but we haven't taken that on yet. Because number one is implementation of the cap and the renewable energy policy. That's really clear, and there's loads of things in there that we could pick from for our priorities or goals. And then there's increasing awareness of sustainable practices, more along the lines what you were talking about. So yeah, I think that is the next thing for the committee to do.
And so those are the things, and how do we do it? That's where we even now have budget, which we never had before. Perhaps when I think there's 20,000, that was for public engagement. So we might, if you come up with something, there might be a need to build a shed. We might have, now we have some money and we have some staff, but I'm not sure where we're at.
Herb, my question to you is, are you clear to yourself on what your level of interest and commitment in progressing these efforts are? I mean, I know, like Bert said, part of what it sounds like is you're looking to see if the committee supports this, which we all clearly do support the education of this. I think for me, the big question is, who takes that on next? Like who's now responsible for moving all of that effort forward? And is that something that you're interested in doing, or are you bringing that back to the committee for broader?
I'm happy to. I mean, again, I think the lift here is extremely small. You know, if it's more than a couple hours, I would be shocked. And it shouldn't even be a couple hours to just, you know, get through and actually implement something. I mean, I do stuff, I mean, all day long in my job. I mean, to add, I mean, I work for the federal government, and to add another web page. I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and we add web pages every day. I mean, we're always doing stuff like this. And the turnaround to, you know, do things like that is really minimal. And so I don't see it as, from a resource perspective, much time. And I'm happy to, like I said, I'm happy to draft content. I'm happy to go meet with or talk to some of these folks to you know, advertise and to direct people, get people traffic to the content that we put out there.
Effie?
I don't think putting up a web page is educating people in the community. I think it's making information available.
Yeah.
But, you know, people are inundated with web pages, email, social media generally. So, you know, if we take this on, that's why I like the idea, and I'm sorry, I keep pushing the idea of CCAN, but that's got some structure that we could use to take these ideas forward. Because it would take a lot more than 2 hours, what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and again, I'm just thinking of
The web
probably
page.
very simplistic, putting up a web page. We have spring coming up now where people will be buying a lot of equipment. So adding a little blurb in the newsletter once or twice, and talking to folks like at the library about how to get the word out. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks have different ideas. I don't think this is necessarily a one and done. You know, I think the content is the foundation, and then you work on the communication to drive people to the content.
So in the interest of time, since we're kind of getting down and still have several things, would it seem agreeable to Herb and the rest of the committee if maybe you formulated some more of that content more finally and talk to some of those people? And so you could come back and say, here's the content, and here's sort of a plan of what I think would be a good way to implement this, at least initially. Does that
I
sound
think
right?
I'm agreeing with Bert. This might be a good opportunity to just take a step back and see, what does this committee actually do?
So you
because-
want to just pause on,
Yeah, I
that
think we
piece
just,
for a minute.
I think we just pause on,
Yeah, maybe
maybe
we
it's
need,
my attempt of just trying to add some value.
maybe we need a whole meeting to just dedicate to just drafting up goals and just talking.
And I think it'd be beneficial to develop, what are our initiatives and our priorities for this year? Because if we have a group of people and you have a finite number of resource hours, where do we want to put our energy? So we do actually, you know, can pull together those resources and add value.
Right?
Yeah.
Bill, I'm working with UNH right now and have 12 interns, and one of the things that I was saying to them is that when we come together, it shouldn't be you working on your individual tasks. It should be everyone's worked on their individual tasks, and now we're putting it all together. And so instead, I think it's like coming up with some sort of a scope, some sort of milestones, project management, who owns what bucket. And when you come in, we go through and we look at that timeline and we share where are we at on each of those deliverables. So are we ahead, are we behind schedule? What are our blockers and how do we move forward with it? But something that we all agree on, because when pitching something like the electric lawn care, it's one of those things that we don't know how it's falling into the rest of what is our charter. And where does it fall on our project? Where does it fall on our priorities? Is it a high priority? Is it a low priority? Is it low hanging fruit? What are we doing with it?
Yeah.
So it's pretty critical.
So in the interest of time, again, I'm just gonna say for the time being, the committee agrees that this content is important. And we should review it and revisit it as how we build it into our bit greater goals, but we're gonna step back and focus on what our goals are first and initially. Bert?
I don't know, I think this would be a good segue. Is there something about the cap on there, I believe?
Cap workshop number 3.
Okay, I think this is a good segue into that because and I think we want on the next meeting to talk about our priorities. So if we put that on the agenda. I think in some ways we have defined in the description of the standing committee that we're going to be supporting the cap. And one of the ways I think that we can do it is to support the community engagement organization, basically, that are out there, which would be at this point, Seacoast Can as one of the major ones, are going to be sponsoring 5 conversations. So there's already a framework that's been worked on every week for months. And one of the conversations is going to be, I think, really a great vehicle to put in small engines and energy, and we're going to get a conversation, and that's going to be ongoing. And that's what Chaz was saying. How does it work together? See, I think nobody has what you have now that you could bring that to the CAP community conversation. And then I think I think Bill wanted to be here and wait until Josh got back to talk about how do we get the priorities for this year, I think, are to support implementation of the CAP. That's why we spent $80,000 to get one. And that's why we want to look into it. And what Effie is doing, and what I need to say that I haven't even done, I want to get the pages printed out like you, so I can read through the CAP and find out what's there, so we can educate ourselves which are the ones we should really go for. So I think I would like to throw it open to the CAP and Bill, or if you said to hold the meeting and
Well,
got
I
time.
wanted to join in the discussion
Right,
of that. Probably everyone remembers that last year we had a series of community conversations that Portsmouth Climate Action organized, working closely with this committee and Peter and Kate. See, we had one on transportation and health and waste and buildings. So I think we've always looked at Portsmouth Climate Action, which is a subgroup of Seacoast Climate Action now, as a resource for this committee and a resource for the city in implementing the CAP. Now we know the CAP is taking form. I think we've got a general idea from the forum, and maybe Kate can give us an update on where things are on that. But last night at Portsmouth Climate Action Wednesday meeting, we talked about another series of 5 community conversations. I think we're probably at the point of putting those on the table and getting feedback from this committee and from the city related to the CAP. I think maybe Jess or Effie do you want to list the topics we were thinking of? I probably would miss a few.
Sure.
As works in progress, really.
Yep. So the topics that we've sort of discussed so far are food waste, and composting, kind of combined in that. Transportation, where we are from a year ago, strategies in the CAP. Health topic as sort of a follow-up and maybe some more specifics. Adaptation and resilience, and energy, including EVs, wind, solar, heat pumps, community power.
And the format would be similar to what we developed for the first 5, really. a 90-minute meeting with some content presentation and some activities to involve the community to get people thinking about exactly how this affects them and what sorts of actions they could take. And I think the CAP provides a really nice broad umbrella for that, with the understanding that these community conversations, to the extent possible, really depending on the topic, would really support the city in actually moving ahead and taking the actions that will be in the CAP. We probably don't want to wait to firm those up until the CAP is done. Some of those may be more appropriate for earlier, like the health. And I think we were considering the sustainability fair, the first of these. And if we aim for 5 over the next calendar year, I think that's what we were thinking about. But I think what we would want to get is some input and involvement from this committee, since Portsmouth Climate Action works so closely with this committee and with Kate and Peter.
I know the city's still very much in support. I know I only made it to one last year and Peter made it to a few more, but I think they went really well last year, and a lot of people were talking about them and came to all the CAP workshops because of them, because of hearing through the grapevine that there was a community conversation. They go there and they hear about the climate action plan, they start taking action. So I think the city's fully in support and could help partner on that still.
One of the terms that we liked, and I think we developed as we were coming up with this format for the first 5 last year, was a community of practice. And I think those really relate to these individual topics. Like TCAG was the beginning of a community of practice on transportation, climate, same with waste, same with buildings, where you get members of the public interested, key stakeholders really engaged around one topic. And I think it would be much harder to do that if there wasn't a CAP. It would just be sort of a conversation, really, rather than something that's helping the city move forward on reaching the targets that will be in the CAP. So a work in progress, I guess, is the way to put it.
Do you want to say something, Evie?
I was going to say it also ties in with Bright Action, because there's specific things people will be able to do when they leave the conversation, take home to their household.
Which would be closely tied to the implementation. It's, if people want to know what can I do, Bright Action will tell you what you could do in terms of home insulation, or what you could do in terms of composting, or your own household's transportation travel, and what it would mean in terms of greenhouse gas emissions.
I would love to see Fred as part of her, I keep saying, thank you, Fred was on last night, but her, I see what you would have would be exactly what the community conversation we're trying to get people to do, is to change behavior with something they can do. So as part of energy, big picture, this is my vision anyway, the CAP, people get to know what's in it. We get the big goal where we need to go as a city. There's some big goals, and then you say, all right, that's so big, what do you do? And then you come up and say, well, you can choose to buy this rather than this, you can get this. And that's where I see the application. So it's not, I think when Effie said just information, it really gets that community of practice. Then they understand we're all in this together with real people doing real things. So that's where I was kind of seeing it fit. Does that make any sense to you?
Not necessarily. Are you, yeah, and it's not that important. It's okay. I'll let it go.
Okay, so to keep things moving, I feel like we're kind of straddling 2 agenda items. So there's CAP workshop number 3 on here. Is that, Kate, something you want to speak to specifically, or?
I was just gonna give the general CAP update that I gave, was that we had a very well attended final workshop for the CAP by the community, which was first week of February. I know a lot of you were there, so thank you for coming. The consultants have gotten all the feedback, and there was an online feedback form that closed yesterday, so they're working on that. and inputting that into the cap, but yeah, moving forward. Hopefully we'll have the final close-ish deadline for when it'll be ready for the city council. I know.
Hey, I think last time you said it was going to go to city departments next.
Right, so we are scheduling, just because a lot of them are municipal strategies, so we are scheduling a meeting with all the department heads, or at least as many department heads or department members as we can get to go over all the proposed municipal strategies, just to make sure it's not stuff that we're already implementing, or if there's things that the city staff would like to add specifically that they know that they can accomplish. So that's coming up in probably the next month, and that'll be internal, and then that input will be fed into it as well.
Is the focus on the city's part of the equation, and the city staff would look at the community part of it as well?
I'm not sure. Just theoretically, in designing the meeting for that, we've just sort of talked about just the municipal strategies, but I know a lot of them feed into the community ones, so I'm sure we'll take any input that staff can give, but
And then will there be a draft that's shared with the community for comment, or is it then final?
sure, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't be another draft open for more feedback and input, just because we've only budgeted the 3 community workshops and those feedback sessions. So it might be something that gets posted and publicly available, but it wouldn't necessarily be a final draft that receives input.
And is there a target date?
No.
Soon.
You know, a lot of the ones listed for community are really municipal. So I think it would be important for the department heads to look at all of them. Like this one, adopt a municipal environmentally preferable purchasing policy that can be used as a model for the private sector. Municipal purchasing policy, and that's listed under community. So, and that's
Yeah,
other places.
I think
too.
a lot of them ended up being mixed on things that maybe were municipal, but needed community support to get approval. So, but it definitely does fall under
Yeah.
both, so I'm sure they'll look at everything and then see what we can impact.
What steps need to occur for the city to adopt the cap? Is that the city manager, or is that the city council has to vote on that?
I believe we
Adoption?
decided that it was gonna go to city council for final adoption,
Okay,
but beforehand, it's gonna go through most of the city departments, I believe. I believe this committee, it has to go through, is what we decided, because it came out of this committee. And then I think the city manager is gonna bless it at least, and then bring it to council.
okay, excellent.
Anything else about the cap? So we were also kind of talking about community engagement. Are there any other community engagement updates? I can quickly fill in about the sustainability fair. So just for review, it's Sunday, April 14th from 12 to 3 at the Connie Bean again. We have over a dozen organizations, businesses and things that have already committed at this point. We are trying to set a March 1st deadline to gauge engagement, and so we can kind of figure out next steps from there once we roughly know how many participants we'll have. But the invitation was sent out to over 60 organizations and businesses and individuals, so hopefully we'll have a pretty good crowd. We have the Eco Club and Seacoast Students for Sustainability on board, and they are also offering food that is free but by donation through a bake sale. We have Red's Good Vibes, which is the food truck that gives food to free. They'll be participating as well. We're working on some live music to make it a little more interesting. So everything is well in the works. And if you have any other questions or thoughts, or anybody you think I might have forgotten, please feel free to email me and let me know, and I can let you know if they're on the list, or I can add them to the list or whatever. Okay, I'm gonna punt the sustainability
sorry.
committee. Oh, yeah,
Is the-
sorry, Jay.
Yeah,
Do you want to go first?
either way.
You.
I just wanted to follow on something Bill said about the community climate conversations. In our discussion in Portsmouth Climate Action, we really were wondering about the role of this committee, the role of the Department of Planning and Sustainability and the Portsmouth Public Library, who was very involved last year. So those are kind of open questions. I don't mean that we're going to discuss and decide them right now, but I think it's important for this committee to know that that's a question.
So for example, participate, collaborate, sponsor, co-own. I think we sort of eased into a good relationship last time where Portsmouth Climate Action really was the one putting these on with partners depending on the topic. And the city was invited to be as involved as you really could manage. And I think like on the transportation one, Peter did the kickoff, but in the publicity, we made it clear that this was closely coordinated with the Sustainability Committee and the city in support of the CAP. And that seemed to work out pretty well. It could be different and it could be more formal. Just really is open to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could talk further about it on the staff's perspective, but I know we're still willing to, sponsor or whatever that name or word would be, but, and still introduce topics if that's what
Yeah.
we need. We don't have so much capability. And I think last year's probably what we were able to give, and that's probably similar to what we're able to give this year, but
I think it was a good opportunity to really leverage yourselves, and I think that the community conversations ended up, I think, being a pretty useful part of the climate ambassadors and activities, because it was the same people organizing the
Yeah.
things. And
I think we were able to get a lot of outreach on it with the city newsletters and with the
Yeah.
Climate Action newsletter. And Monty putting it up on the social medias for the city. I think that is definitely something we're gonna keep doing moving forward if you need it, which we're happy to do.
Jazz, do you have anything that you wanted to?
People that are vendors at
Yep.
the event, do they have to be in Portsmouth?
Nope.
Okay.
We are actually trying to expand it, so I've invited organizations as far north as like roughly probably a Gunkwit area, like the
Okay.
Great Works Land Trust and the Marginal Way Committee, and I've invited businesses that are down in Hampton and people up in Dover, so trying to get it to be a broader swath of the seacoast and not just Portsmouth.
So I think the UNH Evo team would have a lot of fun. It's the electric vehicle organization,
Okay.
that group, and then SUS, which is I don't know if you met the owner, but that's where I developed all like the upcycled all of our upcycled products with. But he makes bags, but he works with people to help make upcycled custom products. So I'll share that with him too.
Okay. Do you mind if we punt our webpage and the email policy to our discussion of what we are and our goals and things till next month? Okay, so I'm gonna take item 7 and shift it to the agenda for next month, which means we have the solar overlay district and the solar panels and the EV charging.
All right, give a very brief update on those. As far as the EV charging ordinance, I have not heard anything since the last Sustainability Committee meeting, where that was the same night that the planning board held a work session on it. As far as the HDC allowing, or the HDC no longer having authority to approve or disapprove solar arrays in the historic district, they met with the planning board last night, and now which fulfills the legal requirement for the planning board to review any ordinances, so the city council could move forward with taking away the HDC's ability to deny solar arrays. And the third item, I would actually defer to Kate. I don't know if she knows anything about the progress on the overlay solar ordinance, and where it last stood was the city council asked the planning and sustainability department what makes the most sense as far as approaches to craft such an overlay.
I'll just say that it's currently with the planning board. That's fair. So that's that update.
Kate, could you speak up? I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, the solar overlay district subject is with the planning board right now, so that's what they're working on, waiting to schedule a meeting to talk about it.
Thanks.
Anybody have anything else?
Well, I was gonna say, I listened to that meeting at the library last night between HDC and the planning board. Turns out it was only like 10 minutes long. And the HDC really wanted to keep their purview of solar panels, roof panels, and they're looking at exemptions. So if they're roof height, and I don't know all the technical requirements, but I think it was March 4th city council meeting that Beth Moreau is going to report back at, if I got the date right.
That would be the next
Yeah,
meeting,
okay.
the first meeting in
Yeah.
March.
Can I just ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
For the next agenda, so we moved our regular meeting to March 21st, and we're gonna talk about, or go over the ordinance,
Skip the stuff
skip the
ordinance
step ordinance.
and our goals and
And our
what we
goals.
are,
Do we think,
including our email policy
Yeah.
and what the sustainability committee webpage would look like.
okay, I'm gonna have to email you and ask you for that list,
That's
but
fine.
do we think we have enough time in one meeting to go over all that, or do we want to dedicate next month's meeting just to reviewing the draft and maybe starting to touch on the goals and pushing some of this other stuff to April? Or do we just decide that at the next month's meeting?
I feel like we can potentially do both. Would it be possible for us to get a draft of the ordinance ahead of time?
Right, like. a
So
week or
that we
so
all
before.
know that, to review that, so that we can sort of get right into the meat of the ordinance and discuss that and make a decision, and then just spend the rest of the meeting on our goals and
So maybe.
what we're doing, and kind of just make it very clear that that's what our agenda is limited to, is those two priorities for next month.
Okay, so maybe as early as I can
If
get it
the
out.
committee agrees, I don't wanna.
Yeah, like a week and a week and a half before, I can send out sort of just homework items for reviewing the ordinance, but also thinking about goals and what you want to see, just so we come prepared. to talk about it.
I think for the goals, we've been talking about the cap, and the latest version of the cap, as Herb mentioned, is a lot shorter. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, Josh, in the ordinance now for our committee, it talks about the renewable energy policy from the committee that you headed some years back. Is that something that you could give a quick presentation to this committee about? Because I feel like we focus so much on the cap and we haven't really
Sure.
looked at the renewable energy policy.
Yeah, I think I still have a 5 or 10 minute presentation
Right.
that I used to give.
I think that's important perspective. I don't know, if the rest of the committee agrees with me or doesn't, but it is in the ordinance, so I think we should be familiar with it.
Anyone have anything else? Okay, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We do a quick close before everybody runs away?
Anything from that, I'm waiting.
All right, we'll start over here with Josh and